So we're back for episode 9, I believe, of FRR recap. It should be a good one. This week, our drivers tackled the Hungaroring circuit, a very difficult circuit in its own right, with corners that seem to constantly attack you, that seem one after the other, with very little break in between. The circuit is not great for DRS overtaking, with only the main/pit straight having DRS. The corners are very flowy whilst being blind at the same time, some of them. We see a lot of mistakes normally, but it normally provides a bit of fun racing. There's normally a few safety cars, as there were this week. And for this week, for Tier 1, Silent Pist is here to take you over the race, where, as far as I remember, it wasn't too chaotic, but I might be wrong. Tell us, Silent.
Well, you would be along the lines, Mose. It wasn't too chaotic, but there was some massive news whilst we were going into qualifying, and that was that we saw Power Evaste back on track, back behind a F1 car wheel. Last season was battling it out with stock. He unfortunately lost on the title. In Brazil, I believe it was, second to last race of the season. But now he's back and fighting fit, and he got pole position in the qualifying standings going into the Hungaroring Grand Prix. And it was a very entertaining Grand Prix with many, many overtakes, many spins, many crashes. And one of those was Razagina HD, and I believe it was Ragnar. Those two going straight into the wall with each other. Wasn't a good sighting, on stream, on commentary, but nevertheless, it did happen. And, Raza did tell me afterwards that he felt like there was nowhere to go, which might have been one of the main reasons, to cause this incident. But also, what also happened is that about 2 hours earlier from qualifying and joining on the lobby, a mysterious figure called Tria, joined our server and also got themselves a seat at Alfa Romeo. Now, nothing was much expected of them, considering no one had ever heard of Tria, but nevertheless, with about, 5 more seconds so to spare, they came across the line P1 at the end of the Grand Prix. It was an absolutely stunner of a drive. Congratulations to Tria for that win. And Weeksy, the big news is it was a double overtake from Weeksy on the last lap, just as we were about to end the Grand Prix. A double overtake from him on Top Gun and also Evaste, which meant he was P2 in the race. And he's level on points with Stocky for P1 in the championship standings. So it could not, the script could not be better written for the next time out in Zandvoort, which is at the sprint race. And also, of course, the Grand Prix itself. So we'll see what happens at Zandvoort in Netherlands. It's going to be an exciting one as always. We'll see you there for the next one.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting race. Good on Weeksy for that double overtake on the last lap, which, it's not quite Hamilton Verstappen stuff, but they are level on points, and there is still 4 races to go, I believe. So it could be a shake-up. 4 races. There's only a total of, 104 points available. Sorry, no, we have a sprint weekend. 112 points available. So we'll see if... I know that Stocky's struggling with Zandvoort a little bit, so if Weeksy can get a jump up with a podium or even a win, and a good finish in the sprint, then who knows? Maybe he might just carry that momentum to sort of carry it over and win.
In fact, actually, I did watch Weeksy actually race at Netherlands in a different league. I was commentating for them on a Sunday. I was watching Weeksy go around the track. And to be honest, it might not be the most fitting of tracks for Weeksy, as I believe he came around 6th in that race. So maybe with Stocky and Weeksy would not be the most amazing or suitable tracks for them. We'll see how that pans out. Maybe a mid-table battle kind of between Weeksy and Stocky. But nevertheless, it's going to be entertaining, isn't it, Moser?
It's going to be entertaining. Just on 2 of the other points, Ranga. Hungary is not his friend. I mean, he finished the race yesterday. He did really well yesterday to sort of come over Monday's misfortune, but especially last season's misfortune. Last season, Hungary was not his track. He DNF'd, I think, in both the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 race. It seemed to not be his track, and if you saw Mondays, you would have seen that he DNF'd as well. You would have thought, oh, he's going to DNF in Tier 2 as well. But he did really well. I think he came home P3, actually. So not only did he actually finish the race, but he finished in a brilliant position as well, getting those extra 15 points. The other point is Trier. Trier, amazing driver. I mean, I must say I wasn't expecting him to go for the win. He used to drive for us back in the F121 days, back before FRR was a thing, back in the days of old, shall we say. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting him to go for the win, but to win by 5 seconds, he did incredibly well. And as you mentioned, another league I would as well. He then went on to win, I believe it was later that day, win at a completely different circuit as well in another league. And that was very, very close. So it shows that he's got the pace. Maybe this game he's getting on a little bit better than he did with 2021. So maybe we might see a good charge of good points finishes, and we'll see where he can land himself in the standings with 4 races to go. So this week we have Jay Johnson, one of your Tier 2 drivers. He currently drives in the Red Bull. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Yourself? I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. So you've only been a part of the league for, I think, the last 3 races. So what do you think so far of FRR?
To be honest with you, it's definitely one of the best leagues I've been in. I think the organisation, straight off the bat, that really impressed me. All the staff, all the admins are super friendly, and it's a competitive league. I think that the skill ranking is quite fair. I think Tier 2 is a very competitive tier, and that's what you like. Sometimes you get in some leagues, Tier 1's competitive, and then Tier 2 is, there's 1 or 2 drivers that are just clear of the rest of the field. But I mean, if you look at it, the last 2 races, there's been 4 or 5 people racing for the race win. So yeah, I think it is a fantastic league.
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, we do have a little bit of a pace divide in Tier 2, as there is in Tier 1, but I think Tier 1 isn't quite as bad. We do tend to have a bit of a pace divide between... Last season, it was about the top 4 to the rest of the field. This season, we've had a big push on recruitment, getting some slightly faster, slightly more consistent drivers in. It's been probably about the top 6, top 8, depending on what point of the season you look at. Obviously, unfortunately, it is quite difficult to keep drivers sometimes, or for whatever reason, drivers leave for personal reasons, or they just... Another league that we had a driver leave recently, that a league they've been part of for a long, long time, a lot longer than they were part of FRR, changed their times, and they were more committed to that league, so it meant they couldn't race with us on a Tuesday, unfortunately. But yeah, it's on average this season, it's probably been the top 6 to top 8 drivers. There's been a decent... They're definitely fighting for the podium, and there's been a lot of fights for the win. So your first race with us was Portugal. Unfortunately, DNF'd, which wasn't the best start. But then you came back at the next round at Monza, and straight away, admittedly, Monza was a bit of a mess, but luckily you weren't affected by any of that during the race or after the race of all the stewarding proceedings. But you finished P2 on track. You kept P2, so you went from a DNF to a P2 in the next race. Sort of that's just as good as coming back from a DNF to a win, arguably. So
yeah,
were you expecting to be around that sort of pace to be able to finish P2 the next round out, and you just got unlucky at Portugal, or were you sort of saying, "Oh, maybe I'll aim for the top of the midfield"?
Not at Monza. I think with Portimao, I think I joined the league 2 days before that race. So to be honest with you, I haven't driven Portugal this year on this game. So I think that outlap for my first qualifying lap was my first lap round Portimao this year. So yeah, I think it was a complete shambles on my end for Portimao. But Monza, yeah, as you said, there was a lot happened, and luckily enough, I was fortunate to keep myself out of the majority of things, and I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time to pick up P2. I'd probably say one of the best races I have had in a long time. I think the qualifying, I felt I did really poorly. I had 3 really scuffed laps. I think I was P9, and I think the raw pace I had to come through the field, it was quite impressive, and I was quite sort of proud of myself, because it was some of the time management as well was a big part of it as well. So yeah, I think it was a massive surprise. I actually finished on the podium. I was probably aiming to be in the higher end point scoring positions, but I was not expecting P2. I can't lie to you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you did really well to avoid all the chaos that was going on with the top runners. When it came to it, your position wasn't actually affected by penalties. You finished P2 on track and you stayed P2. The lead jumbled about between a few hands and every other position up and down to, I think, about P5. So you did really well to stay exactly where you were and have nothing affect it up in P2.
Thank you.
So you haven't been part of FRR long. Like I say, 3 races. You joined just before the halfway point of Season 2. From your pace over the last 2 races, or even 3 races before the DNF, what are you sort of aiming for as an initial goal for by the end of Season 2?
I think it's establishing, if I can speak English, myself on this grid. Sort of finding out where I stand. I think personally, all eyes are on Season 3 for me. I want to have a good start to the season next year. So to do that, I need to find out where I stand in this field, and see where I line up next to some of the drivers on this grid. So yeah, I think just sort of consistently point scoring would be a good end to the season for me. Maybe another podium in there. That would, yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good aim, and I definitely think if you keep up the sort of pace you've had over the last 2 races, if you get yourself a good teammate for Season 3, I think, unfortunately, this season when it comes to the constructors, a fair amount of the quickest people have been quite unlucky. So Nightel, unfortunately, his teammate Fixable Rhyme has been absent because he's been very busy with exams. I think the McLaren boys, both of them have missed a fair few races, but Harry's been a bit shafted because Acid has missed a fair few. You could even say the same with my teammate, in all fairness. I mean, I'm not exactly scoring points every race or finishing every race, but he's also missed a few. He had a race ban brought over from last season. It's constructors is a bit dominated by the 2 Alfa Romeo boys this season. They seem a really good pairing. They're very similar pace, or they seem to have sort of levelled out on pace at the moment. I think Tom had a bit of a rough patch against Wekaz earlier in the season, but it has sort of levelled out now. So I think, unfortunately, constructors is sort of a definite for them. But yeah, I think if you get yourself a good teammate for Season 3, there's no reason that if you're similar pace that you couldn't fight for a championship bid. You definitely seem to have the pace, but it's whether or not you can continue that across an entire 12, 14, 16 rounds.
Yeah, exactly that. As well as that, yeah, I think finding a teammate for next year is going to be a or putting myself out there for someone who is looking for a teammate, putting myself available for someone that might want me to race with them. That is something that I would that I am trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, we let people pick their own teammates within reason. So, like, if you finish in the top, I believe in the top 3, you're then not allowed to pick from the top 6. So you don't sort of get a monopoly at the top end. So come next season, Tom and Weckaz probably won't be able to be teammates. So they're both very quick drivers that will be looking for a respectfully quick driver, or a driver that has decent pace. It's not always about qualifying, as Italy will show. Italy was a bit of a mess. But yeah, I definitely think that if you do get yourself a good teammate, I think there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to be up there. So, sorry. You're in tier 2, in our second tier, which is, this season has been very competitive. Not so much last season, but this season has been very, very competitive, with sort of Night Owl and Tom sort of topping it out, being the lead. What do you think it takes to compete in tier 2, but sort of in the top of the midfield, in the podium places of tier 2?
Being there at the right place at the right time. That comes with luck, obviously. But I think, if I look at Monza and I look at yesterday, for the majority of the race, I have been P4, P3, P2 at one point, P5, around them positions, and that's where you want to be if you want to score a podium. And I think coming off the misfortune of others as well is another thing, and that comes with being as consistent as possible with lap times, with making as few mistakes as possible. Not lunging into defending or lunging into attacking too early or too late. There's a right mix you have to find, and yeah, I think just having that consistency will allow you to pick up the pieces, really, I think.
Yeah, consistency is key, obviously, and sort of staying out of trouble, keeping out of the barrier, and being able to capitalise on the misfortune of others is definitely a big part of racing. But it's definitely, if history is anything to go by, definitely a big part of racing in tier 2. So that's all the questions I've got related to Formula 1 and league racing. The only other question I've got for you is, apart from obviously F1 and gaming in general, I guess, what are your hobbies outside of Formula 1, outside of league racing?
Bit of a typical one, but probably football. Play Sunday league, stuff like that. Probably golf as well. I play a bit of golf. I got into that through my granddad, who used to take me golfing since I was like 7, and I've just built up some sort of love for it. I don't play it competitively or anything, but every time my granddad would go out to play golf, I'd go with him, and yeah, it's just sort of a weekend thing that I do.
It's very sports-based hobbies still. So, as I say, that's all the questions I've got. Unless you've got any questions you'd like to ask.
No, I haven't. I think that's us wrapped up for this interview.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and good luck next week for our second sprint weekend of the season at Zandvoort.
Cheers, guys.
This week also saw our tier 2 drivers tackle the Hungaroring. It's quite a chaotic race with multiple VSCs and multiple safety cars, as well as multiple DNFs. Josh is here to take you through the proceedings of the race.
Thank you very much, Moser. We'll start off with qualifying. A fairly straightforward and non-chaotic qualifying. It saw Tom Lock take his second pole position of the season with 1:16.1. Wekaz and Gamer Boy had two early qualifying DNFs with no laps being set for them to. Tom Lock's other pole position was at Suzuka. I think that was round 5. We'll move on to the race and talking of Tom Lock, he had an absolutely horrific start going from P1 to P7 on the straight line with Night Owl taking the lead going into turn 1 with Jada Johnson and Brewmaster having an early collision just midway through sector 1. There was no DNF, but there definitely was some damage. But Tom Lock making a resurgence on the first lap and finished the lap up into third. Moving on into lap 2, Bad Boy and Night Owl had a beautiful fight for the lead, which ended up in a collision. Bad Boy getting wind damage, which brought out a virtual safety car. Lap 3, Ranger and Tom Lock did collide, which caused a yellow flag. No damage for either of them. Moser DNF'd on lap 6, with Wekaz getting a drive-through penalty, which later saw him disqualified as failing to serve it, which I believe was down to a safety car just a couple of laps later. Ranger got past Wekaz on lap 9, with Night Owl getting past Josh as well. Lap 11 saw the first safety car of the race with Bad Boy crashing. I think at the time the stream wasn't exactly showing what's happened there. Lap 14, Wekaz was disqualified for not serving that drive-through, and Gamer Boy was also disqualified, maybe also for another drive-through. Fixable and Josh had a collision on lap 16, and Tom Lock did spin. From lap 16 to the end, there wasn't too much happening, really. So overall, quite an exciting Tier 2 race. So a couple of safety cars. A disappointing weekend, really, in the end for Wekaz, who came into this weekend quite near the top of the driver standings, and obviously this weekend not getting any points, not even finishing, has hurt his championship fights, really. But Night Owl, good result for him, getting another first place. Ranger came along in second with RWSRL Harry in third. Quietly got on with the job in hand and got the podium he deserved.
So that marks once again the end of another episode. A massive thank you to everybody that helped out this week, but an even bigger thank you to Jay Johnson, who gave up his time and came on to give us an interview. Make sure you tune in next week for episode 10, I believe. Episode 10, our first double digits episode for, ironically, what should be a very interesting race for the second sprint race of the season around the circuit of Zandvoort. Ta-da.